The sun hammered the dust. Rip Cain's horse, Shadow, favored its left foreleg. The animal huffed, a dry cough of dust. Purgatory Creek looked like firewood waiting for a match. The buildings leaned, the wood warped gray. A sign, shot full of holes, offered a suggestion. Purgatory Creek. Keep riding. Rip ignored it. He swung a leg over the saddle. His boots hit the cracked earth. The impact jolted up his spine. He needed water for the horse. He needed whiskey for himself. He smelled sour mash and despair. The scratched glass saloon. Rip looped the reins on a dry hitching post. He gave the horse a hard pat on the neck. Soon, he muttered. The batwing doors groaned on their leather hinges. He pushed through. Cool, dark air hit him. It smelled of stale beer, sweat, and something chemical. 3 men sat at a corner table, cards slick in their hands. They didn't look up. A 4th man, built like a brick church and wearing a greasy duster despite the heat, watched Rip's reflection in the bar mirror. His face was Shadow. The bartender, thin as a rail, kept wiping the same glass with a gray rag. The glass was clean. Rip rested his palms on the warped wood bar. It felt sticky. Bottle, he said. His voice was a rasp. The bartender's eyes flicked to the Union buckle on Rip's belt. The brass was dull, but the US was clear. The bartender slid a bottle of amber liquid down the bar. It stopped 3 inches from Rip's hand. Rip pulled a silver dollar from his vest. The coin spun, caught the light from the door, and landed flat. That's a Union buckle, the big man at the table said. His voice was gravel rolling downhill. Rip didn't turn. He looked at the bottle. He uncorked it, the sound loud in the quiet room. We don't favor Union men in Purgatory Creek, the gravel voice said. Rip poured a finger. I'm not asking you to favor me. I'm buying a drink. He lifted the glass. The chair scraped the floor. Heavy boots stomped, shaking the floorboards. The air thickened. The big man the brick church loomed over Rip, blocking the light from the door. He smelled like he'd been sleeping in his clothes for a month. You deaf, Bluebelly? The man shoved Rip's shoulder. Rip moved with the push. His heel hit the brass footrail. He didn't look at the man. He looked at his own glass. Or just stupid. The man shoved him again. Water. Rip's hat tipped. He righted it. I'm tired. My horse is lame. I want this bottle. You'll get nothing. The man's hand, a slab of scarred meat, grabbed for Rip's collar. It was the wrong move. Rip didn't step back. He stepped in. His left hand clamped the man's reaching wrist. His right hand, holding the heavy whiskey glass, didn't stop. It rose. It smashed against the bridge of the man's nose. Glass shattered. Whiskey sprayed. Bone cracked. The man roared. A wet, broken sound. He stumbled back, hands flying to his face. Rip didn't wait. He didn't draw the Colt at his hip. He grabbed the front of the man's greasy duster, spun him, and slammed him face first into the bar. Wood cracked. The man's head bounced. A Bowie knife, 8 inches of polished steel, appeared in Rip's left hand. He pressed the blade flat under the man's ear, the point digging into the soft flesh of his throat. Don't, Rip said. The man froze. He was breathing hard, a choked whistle. He spat blood and a piece of tooth onto the bar top. The saloon went dead silent. The 2 card players hadn't moved. One held a 5 of spades, his knuckles white. The bartender looked like he'd swallowed his dish rag. The only sound was the man's ragged breathing and the drip, drip, drip of blood onto the floorboards. Rip held the knife steady. He watched the man's eyes in the mirror. They were wide, full of pain and red surprise. I'm finished, the man gurgled, blood filling his mouth. Rip eased the pressure. He slid the knife away, wiped the small drop of blood on the man's own duster, and made the steel disappear. He stepped back. The man collapsed. He slid down the front of the bar, leaving a wet, red smear. He landed in a heap on the floor, clutching his broken face. Rocking, Rip turned to the bartender. The man was a statue. Rip pulled another coin from his pocket. He placed it on the sticky, bloody bar. For the bottle and the glass. He picked up the whiskey bottle. The neck was still intact. He walked toward the doors. The 2 card players watched him pass. He didn't look at them. He pushed the doors open. The sunlight hit him. The hammer. He stood on the porch, squinting. He took a long pull from the bottle. The whiskey burned a clean line down his throat. His horse was still there, head low. Right, Rip said to the animal. Let's find a livery. Then you get water, I get more of this. He walked down the street, boots kicking up the same dust, leaving the silence of the scratched glass behind him. He passed the sheriff's office. A man in a clean black suit stood in the shadow of the doorway, watching him. The man didn't smile. Rip kept walking. Rip Campbell nursed his drink. The whiskey was thin, tasted like creek water and regret. The bartender, a man with a face like crumpled paper, was right. Trouble felt thick in the air. A storm just over the ridge. The piano player hit a string of sour notes. Then he stopped. The saloon doors didn't groan like they had for Rip. They swung open with the dry thwack-thwack slapping the inside walls. The man who stood there blocked the sun. He was a long shadow in a black duster. Black hat, pulled low. Black boots, scuffed but clean. He stepped inside, and the talk died. The click of poker chips stopped. A man at a back table, about to laugh, choked it. The man in black moved from the door. He didn't walk to the bar. He stopped in the center of the room, his boots planted on the filthy floorboards. His duster hung open. 2 pearl-handled revolvers sat low on his hips. He pushed his hat back an inch with one finger. His eyes were the color of a winter sky. They swept the room once. They missed nothing. When he spoke, his voice was low, but it filled the space. It sounded like stones grinding together. I'm looking for a man. Nobody moved. The bartender held a glass midair. Goes by Reuben Clay, the man in black said. The name hit the room like a shot. The bartender put the glass down. Too hard. The sound was a crack in the silence. The card players stared at their hands. A man by the wall seemed to shrink, trying to press himself into the wood. Rip leaned his elbow on the bar. He watched the man in the mirror, over the rows of dusty bottles. He saw the set of the man's jaw. He saw the tension in the room. A wire pulled tight. The man in black waited. He held the quiet for 3 heartbeats. 4. He wasn't asking again. He got his answer in the faces that wouldn't meet his. He turned, his duster flaring. He didn't look back. The batwing door swung shut behind him. Thwack-thwack. The dust he'd raised settled. For a long moment, the saloon was a painting. Then the piano player fumbled a chord. The man who'd choked on his laugh let out a sharp cough. The card players threw their hands in. Rip lifted his glass. He drank the last of the watered-down whiskey. Reuben Clay. He rolled the name around in his head. It felt heavy. He looked at the bartender. The man was pale, his hands shaking as he stacked glasses. Rip pushed his empty glass forward. He didn't need to ask for another. The bartender poured Stena. The bottle clicked against the rim of Rip's glass. That, the bartender said, his voice a low rasp, was Black Jack Harlan. He set the bottle on the bar. He didn't move to take Rip's coin. Black Jack, one of the card players echoed from his table. He spat a stream of tobacco juice. It missed the spittoon. Heard he was dead? He ain't dead, the other player said. He was shuffling the deck, his hands moving fast. Too fast. Click-click-click. Not yet. Rip took a sip. The whiskey still tasted thin. He looked at the bartender. The man's face was all worry lines. Reuben Clay, Rip said. Just the name. The bartender flinched. He grabbed his rag and started wiping the bar again. Wiping around the coin Rip had left. He's hunting him, the bartender said. That's what Harlan does. He hunts. Clay murdered his brother, the card player said. The shuffling stopped. Stabbed him 5 years ago. Down in the panhandle. Wasn't a stabbing, his partner argued, laying the deck flat. Heard he shot him in the back. Over a woman, it was cards. It was a horse. Don't matter what it was, the bartender cut in. His voice was sharp. Harlan don't care what it was. He just cares who. And he's here. The piano player slid off his stool. He picked up his hat. I'm feeling poorly. Think I'll step out? He didn't walk. He hurried, slipping out the side door. The saloon felt emptier. They say he rode into Abilene, the first card player said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Killed 3 men before his drink got warm. 2, his partner said, and 1 was an accident. He was aiming for the sheriff. He don't miss. Rip finished his glass. He stood up straight. The weariness was still in his bones, but something else was there now. A hum, a tightening in his gut. He looked at the men. They were spooked. They looked like rabbits who'd seen a hawk's shadow. They saw a demon. They ghost in a black duster. Rip saw a man with a question. He tossed another coin on the bar. It clattered next to the first one. For the bottle, Rip said. He picked it up. He'd need it. He walked out of the saloon, the batwing doors groaning for him. The sun was still high, still hot. The street was empty. He stood on the porch. He looked left, toward the livery. He looked right, toward the sheriff's office and the general store. Black Jack Harlan was somewhere in this town. So was Reuben Clay. Rip sense told him to get his horse, ride out, and let this town's troubles die with its own men. He took a pull from the bottle. He walked down the steps and turned right. Curiosity was a mean-spirited traveling partner. Rip leaned against the porch rail of the general store, the wood rough against his back. He took the bottle from his lips. The street was dead quiet. He saw him. Black Jack Harlan. Harlan stood in the middle of the dust, not moving. He faced the sheriff's office. He looked like a man waiting for a train that was never coming. The door of the jailhouse opened. A man stepped out, blinking in the bright sun. He was thick in the middle, his shirt straining over his gut. A tin star was pinned crooked on his vest. He hitched his gun belt up. It slid back down. This was Sheriff Amos Dyer. Dyer walked into the street. He stopped 10 feet from Harlan. He had to look up a little. "You'll be Black Jack Harlan," Dyer said. His voice was too loud for the quiet street. Harlan said nothing. He just watched the man. Dyer puffed his chest. "I know why you're here. And I'm telling you, this town don't need your trouble." Rip watched Harlan. The man hadn't moved a muscle. He could have been carved from dark stone. The silence made Dyer shift. He put his hand on the butt of his pistol. "Rattlesnake Gulch is a peaceful town," Dyer said. "I won't have you shooting up my street. Do you understand me? I am the law here." Harlan's gaze was flat. He looked at Dyer like he was a piece of tumbleweed. "You ride out?" Dyer demanded. "You ride out now, or I'll run you out." Harlan looked at the sheriff. He held the man's eyes for a long, heavy second. Then he looked away, past Dyer, down the street. He turned. His duster flared. He just walked away. His boots made soft sounds in the thick dust. He didn't look back. He just walked, heading toward the other end of town. Sheriff Dyer stood there, his hand still on his gun. He was talking to Harlan's back. "You hear me? You keep riding." Harlan kept walking. He didn't slow. He didn't speed up. Dyer let his hand fall from his gun. He watched Harlan go, his face red under his hat. He spat in the dust. Then he turned. He saw Rip. Dyer's eyes narrowed. He looked at RIP, at the bottle in his hand, at the dust on his clothes. "What you looking at?" Dyer snapped. Rip didn't answer. He just lifted the bottle, a small salute. Dyer's face tightened. He looked like he wanted to say something else. He looked at the gun on Rip's hip. He thought better of it. Dyer turned, stomped back to his office, and slammed the door. The sound echoed. Rip took another drink. The sheriff was scared. Rip had seen scared men before. This was different. This wasn't just a man scared of a gun. This was a man scared of a question. The sun started to dip. It painted the edges of the dust clouds orange. Rip walked, the whiskey bottle lighter in his hand. He left the main street, following the sound of a weak harmonica. He found him behind the burned-out shell of the old tannery. A man sitting cross-legged by a small fire of mesquite roots. The man's clothes were more rags than fabric. His face was hidden under a week's worth of gray stubble and a hat that had given up. The harmonica stopped. The man looked up. His eyes were watery, but sharp. "Evenin'," the drifter said. Rip nodded. He stood over the small fire. The smoke smelled sweet. "That bottle half full?" the drifter asked. "Near enough," Rip said. "Mind, Shireen?" Rip unstoppered it and handed it down. The drifter took a long, gurgling pull. He wiped his mouth on a sleeve that was mostly holes. Obliged, he passed the bottle back. Rip took a drink. He crouched by the fire, feeling the meager heat. He pulled out his pouch of tobacco and papers. The drifter watched him roll a cigarette. "Got enough for two?" Rip rolled a second one, licked the paper, and passed it over. He lit his own with a twig from the fire. They smoked. The silence stretched. The harmonica stayed on the man's lap. "Town's wound tight," Rip said. The drifter chuckled. It was a dry, hacking sound. Wound tighter in a 7-day clock. Seen the sheriff. Puffing himself up like a prairie chicken. He was talking to a ghost, Rip said. "Black Jack Harlan." The drifter nodded. "Smoking. He ain't a ghost. He's just a man. Lookin'? The sheriff? He ain't puffin'. He's protectin'." Rip looked at the drifter. The man's eyes met his, over the glowing end of the cigarette. "Protectin' what? His investment?" The drifter took another pull from the bottle Rip had left on the ground. "Man down at the livery. New fella. Sweeps. Stalls. Calls himself Pete." The drifter pointed with his chin toward the center of town. "Sheriff's been over there 3 times since noon. Talkin' him coffee. Talkin' him whiskey. Talkin' him low and fast. The new fella, ... Pete, ... He looks like he's seen his own Hanan." Rip drew on his cigarette. The pieces clicked. A man in black asking a name. A sheriff sweating in the street. A new stable hand, getting visits from the law. "Pete," Rip said. "That's what he calls himself," the drifter said. "But he don't look like a Pete. He looks like a man who has been running so long he forgot what he was running from. Till today." Rip stood up. He left the rest of his cigarette with the drifter, beside the bottle. "You keep it?" Rip said. "Figured I would." The drifter picked up his harmonica. He didn't look at Rip again. He just blew a single, mournful note. Rip walked back toward the town. The livery stable was a dark shape against the falling night. He saw a light in the small office window. It flickered. He understood now. Dyer wasn't trying to run Harlan out to keep the peace. He was trying to hide a man named Reuben Clay. Rip went back to the saloon. The piano was silent. The card players were gone. Only the bartender remained, polishing the same glass he'd been polishing an hour ago. He stopped. Black Jack Harlan sat at a table in the corner, in the shadows. He wasn't drinking. His hands were flat on the table, palms down. He looked up as Rip entered. He had been waiting. Rip walked to the bar. "Whiskey," Rip said. The bartender looked from Rip to the man in the corner. He poured the drink, fast. His hand shook. Rip took the glass. He didn't drink. He turned. "You watched me," Harlan said. His voice was low, but it filled the room. It wasn't a question. "You watched the sheriff," Rip answered. "He talks loud. He's scared," Rip said. He took a sip. "He's hiding someone," Harlan said. Rip looked at the dark figure. "The man at the livery. The one who calls himself Pete." Harlan's head tilted. A bear movement. "You listen?" "I get bored," Rip said. "He'll run," Harlan said. "The sheriff will try to move him. Tonight, or before dawn. When he does, he'll head for the canyons." Rip waited. "I need a man who can track," Harlan said. "A man who isn't on Dyer's payroll. A man who isn't from this town." Rip finished his whiskey. He set the glass down on the bar. He made a clean, hard sound. "Trekking costs money," Rip said. "I have money." Harlan slid a hand into his duster. He pulled out a small leather pouch. It was heavy. He tossed it. It landed on the bar, jangling. "That's $20, Harlan said. "There's another 20 when I find him." Rip looked at the pouch. He was low. He had $2, a worn-out saddle, and a horse that needed shoes. The boredom was a dull ache. This was a cure. "You're paying me to find a man," Rip said. "What happens when you find him?" "He murdered my brother." Harlan said it's simple. Like he was stating the color of the sky. "That's my business. It becomes my business if I'm standing next to you," Rip said. "Do you find him? Do you point? Do you get paid?" Harlan's eyes were flat. "The rest is mine." Rip looked at the pouch. He felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. It was the same feeling he got before a thunderstorm when the air went still and yellow. He picked up the pouch. It was heavy. "He runs," Rip said. "I track. He'll run." Harlan stood up. The chair scraped. "Be at the livery before sunrise. Watch, don't be seen." Black Jack Harlan walked to the door. He didn't look at the bartender. He didn't look back at R.I.P. The batwing doors swung shut. R.I.P. was left alone in the quiet saloon. He held the heavy pouch. He weighed it in his palm. Gold. He looked at the bartender, who was frozen by the bar, watching him. Rip nodded once. He slid the pouch into his coat pocket. He felt the weight of it against his ribs. He turned and walked out. He left his empty glass on the bar. The bartender didn't move until Rip was gone, the doors swinging slowly to a stop. The night was cold. Rip didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the wall of the general store, across from the livery. The street was a channel of pale blue moonlight. He watched the shadows. An hour before dawn, the livery's side door opened. A sliver of yellow lantern light cut the dark. Sheriff Dyer stepped out, low and quick. He looked up the street. He looked down. He was alone. He waved a hand back inside. A second man came out, shorter, hunched. He carried a saddlebag and a canteen. It was the man from the stalls, the one called Pete. Reuben Clay Dyer pointed toward the alley that led east, out of town. He handed the man a rifle. Clay took it, his hands clumsy. Dyer gave him a hard shove. "Go," his voice a low rasp. Clay stumbled and ran. He kept to the shadows of the alley. Dyer watched him go. He waited a full minute. He looked up and down the street one last time, his gaze passing right over Rip's shadow. The sheriff went back inside the livery. Rip didn't move. He waited. The sky turned from black to gray. A figure stepped out of the shadow of the saloon. Black Jack Harlan. He had been there the whole time, on the same street. Harlan looked at R.I.P. He nodded toward the alley. R.I.P. stood up. His legs were stiff. He walked to the alley entrance. Harlan followed. Rip knelt. The dirt was hard, but the boot prints were clear. A running man, digging in his toes. Heading east, he gave him a rifle. Rip said. "He'll head for the badlands." Harlan said. "He will." Rip walked back to his horse, tied outside the saloon. He saddled it. Harlan was already mounted on his own black horse, a shadow waiting. Rip swung up. He rode into the alley. He didn't have to look hard. Clay was moving fast and sloppy. He was panicked. He left the last building of Rattlesnake Gulch behind. The sun touched the horizon. The world turned a washed-out shade of red. Rip pointed. "He's running low. See where he dragged his foot? He's tired?" Harlan just grunted. They rode for an hour. The tracks led into a dry wash, then up a shale slide. Rip found it snagged on a piece of greasewood, a blue kerchief. He didn't stop, just pointed at it as they passed. Harlan saw it. Rip kept his eyes on the ground. Broken twigs. A fresh scuff on a rock. Small pebbles kicked loose. He reined in. He looked up. High above, against the pale morning sky, 3 black dots wheeled in a slow, patient circle. "Buzzards," Rip said. Harlan looked up. He spurred his horse. "He's not running anymore," Rip said, riding after him. "Or he found something dead." Harlan didn't answer. He just rode, his duster trailing behind him, quiet as death itself. They followed the buzzards. The birds led them to a narrow cut between two mesas. The smell hit Rip first. Copper and smoke. They found the campsite tucked against an overhang. The fire was a pile of gray-white ash with a single red ember glowing in the center. The horse was 20 yards away. It had slid down a shale embankment. Its neck was turned at an angle that meant it was broken. The buzzards had been at its belly. Harlan dismounted. He walked to the dead horse. He looked at it. Rip got down. He walked to the fire. He poked the ash with his boot. Still warm. He was here an hour ago. Maybe less. He looked at the ground. A canteen was lying empty on the rock. A strip of jerky dropped. Footprints led away from the camp, heading up the rocks. His horse spooked, Rip said, or it slipped. He's on foot. Harlan didn't look at the tracks. He was staring at the dead animal. He's not far now, Rip said. He pulled out his tobacco and papers. He started to build a cigarette. He's got the rifle Dyer gave him. They'll find a high spot. They'll wait. Harlan was quiet. Rip licked the paper. You're going to a lot of trouble for this. Harlan turned from the horse. He looked at Rip. The story in the saloon, Rip said, striking a match on his buckle. They said, Clay shot your brother, murdered him. He did. This ain't justice, Rip said. He lit the cigarette. This is something else. Harlan walked over. He stood close enough that Rip could see the lines around his eyes. My brother, Harlan said, his voice low. He was a fool. He drank. He ran with men who'd shoot their own mother for $1. Rip smoked. He waited. He wasn't innocent, Harlan said. He was in a card game in Laredo. He was caught marking the deck. Clay was there. Levi pulled his gun. So Clay shot him, Rip said. Clay shot him. Rip let the smoke out. Sounds like Clay was just faster. He was my brother, Harlan said. The words sat in the air. Rip looked at the man in black. The legend from the saloon whispers was gone. This was just a man. A man with the reason. He's not getting paid, Rip said. He's not doing it for a reputation. He's just ... doing it. Blood, Harlan said. He looked up at the rocks. He's up there. R.I.P. nodded. He dropped his cigarette. He ground it into the dirt with his heel. He looked at the tracks. Clay was climbing. Yeah, Rip said. He is. He walked to his horse. He pulled his own rifle from its scabbard. This wasn't about justice. It was just a job. And it was about to end. Rip pulled the rifle from the scabbard. He chambered around. The sound was loud in the quiet cut. A whip crack split the air. Stone chips exploded from the rock face. 6 inches from Rip's head. He didn't think. He dove, landing on his stomach behind the overhang. Harlan was already flat behind the dead horse. A second shot kicked dust near Harlan's boot. It came from high up the ridge. Rip eased his hat back. He looked. Sunlight glinted on a rifle barrel. 2 men, dark vests. One of them wore a star. Dyer's men, Rip said. He didn't shout. Depuos Harlan's voice came from behind the horse. He wasn't sending Clay out. He was setting a trap. He just wanted us clear of town, Rip said. The rifle on the ridge cracked again. The bullet punched through the horse's flank. It made a wet, solid sound. They've got the high ground, Rip said. He slid his rifle forward, resting the barrel on the rock. He was pinned. Harlan drew his pistol. He fired twice at the ridge. The shots were low. He was just making them keep their heads down. The men on the ridge fired back. Lead spanged off the rocks. Rip watched the puff of smoke from the rifle of the man on the left. He was the better shot. He was the one with the badge. Rip sighted down his barrel. He found the man, a dark shape against the sky. He let his breath out. He squeezed the trigger. The shot was clean. The man on the ridge stood up straight. The sound carried down. A short, sharp cry. He dropped his rifle. He clutched his chest. He pitched forward and rolled. A loose tumble of limbs down the shale. He stopped halfway. The other man fired. The shot went wide. Rip chambered another round. The second man looked at his partner. He looked down at Rip and Harlan. He fired one more time. Wild. He scrambled backward, out of sight. Silence. The echo of the last shot bounced off the canyon walls. It faded. Rip waited. A minute. He heard the scrape of boots on rock. The man was running. He stood up. He brushed the dust from his shirt. Harlan rose from behind the horse. He holstered his pistol. He looked up at the man lying on the rocks. The other one? Harlan asked. He's hit, Rip said. I saw blood on the rock he used for cover. He'll go back to Dyer, Harlan said. Rip nodded. He walked over to the man he'd shot. He was dead. The badge was a simple tin star. A deputy. This wasn't about Clay running, Rip said. He looked back at Harlan. This was about us not coming back. The town's rotten, Harlan said. Rip looked toward town. Yeah. Let's go see how rotten. They left the dead deputy on the ridge for the buzzards. They didn't take the main road. R.I.P. led them back through the dry washes, a long circle that brought them to the edge of Rattlesnake Gulch after the sun had set. No moon. The town was a collection of yellow squares in the dark. They dismounted at the livery, leaving the horses in the shadows. They walked. Their boots made no sound in the thick dust. The sheriff's office was dark, but a sliver of light showed under the door. Rip didn't stop. He put his hand on the door. He pushed. It swung open. Sheriff Amos Dyer was at his desk. A single lantern burned. He was pouring whiskey into a coffee mug. His hand was shaking. His hat was off. His thin hair was slicked with sweat. He looked up. His eyes went wide. He saw Rip. Then he saw the man in black who filled the doorway behind him. Dyer's hand went for the pistol on his desk. "Don't," Rip said. Dyer's hand froze. "Your man didn't make it," Rip said. He walked into the office. "Dyer won't? He's bleeding. He'll be back soon. If he doesn't die in the dark first." Harlan stepped inside. He closed the door. He leaned against it. The room seemed to shrink. "You set us up?" Rip said. He walked to the desk. He looked down at Dyer. I don't know what you're talking about," Dyer said. His voice was a dry croak. "You sent Clay out? You sent your men to kill us?" Rip put his hands on the desk. He leaned in. "Why?" Dyer swallowed. He looked at Harlan. Harlan just watched him. "He's a murderer," Dyer said, nodding at Harlan. "He came here. He ... He threatened me." "You lied," Rip said. He looked at the mess on the desk. Papers. A telegraph key. A stack of wanted posters held down by a rock. Rip picked up the rock. He leafed through the posters. "You're a brave man, Sheriff," Rip said, looking at a poster for a bank robber. "Sending your men out. Or just stupid." He kept turning the posters. One for a horse thief. One for a road agent. Then he found it. A poster for Reuben Clay. "Wanted. Murder, Laredo." A thick, black line was drawn through it. Across the bottom, in DR's own handwriting. "Pardoned by a DR." Rip held it up. He showed it to Harlan. "He's your snitch," Rip said. He dropped the poster on the desk. He looked at the other posters. He saw notes in the margins. Names, places. "He's been feeding you names," Rip said. "He gives you the small-time outlaws. You look like a hero, and you protect him from the big ones." Dyer didn't speak. He just stared at the poster. "You protect him from Harlan," Rip said. It's law," Dyer whispered. "He's an informant." "You call an ambush law," Rip said. He looked at Harlan. Harlan hadn't moved. His hand was resting on the butt of his pistol. "He's a dead man, Sheriff," Harlan said. His voice was soft. Dyer looked at the floor. "Where is he?" Rip asked. Dyer shook his head. Harlan moved from the door. He took one step. "He's in the old holding cell," Dyer said. "Fast." "In the back?" "The one in the cellar. He's locked in." Rip looked at Harlan. Harlan nodded. "We'll be back for him," Harlan said. Rip looked at the sheriff. He saw a man who had sold his badge for a few easy arrests. "You're not a lawman," Rip said. "You're just a traitor." They walked out. They left Dyer alone in the yellow light with his whiskey and his stack of pardon. They stepped out of the office into the dark street. The sliver of yellow light from Dyer's office vanished as Harlan pulled the door shut. "He's scared," Rip said. "A scared man with a badge is worse than a rattler. He's not just going to let us take Clay. He doesn't have a choice," Harlan said. "He's got choices." Rip looked up and down the street. It was too quiet. "He'll arrest you. He'll say you murdered his deputy out in the Badlands. He'll make it legal." Harlan didn't stop. He walked toward the alley that led behind the office, toward the cellar entrance. "He can try. He will." They reached the alley. The heavy wooden door was set low into the ground with a padlock on a hasp. Harlan put his hand on the lock. "Harlan," Rip said. A man's voice cut through the night. "Hold it right there." Rip didn't turn. He heard the boot scrapes. More than one. Sheriff Dyer stepped out from the side of the building. He held a shotgun. The wounded deputy was with him, his arm in a dirty sling, a pistol in his good hand. Two other men, townsfolk Rip didn't know, held rifles. They looked nervous. "Black Jack Harlan," Dyer said. His voice was loud now, full of authority. "I'm placing you under arrest for the murder of Deputy Frank Stokes." Harlan turned, slowly. He looked at the men. He looked at Dyer. "He shot first," Harlan said. "He was attempting to arrest a known murderer," Dyer said. "You ambushed him. And his partner." He nodded at the wounded man. "That's not how it happened," Rip said. Dyer swung the shotgun toward Rip. "And you, Rip Campbell. You're an accessory to murder. You'll hang with him." Rip looked at the shotgun. He looked at the two townsfolk. Their rifle barrels were shaking. "You're not arresting anyone, Amos," Rip said. "You're just trying to clean up your mess." "Last chance," Campbell Dyer said. "Step away from him." Rip looked at Harlan. Harlan was watching Dyer. His hand was low, near his holster. "He's not worth this," Rip said to Harlan, his voice quiet. "He's my brother's killer," Harlan said. Dyer took a step. "Raise your hands, both of you." Rip raised his left hand. "All right, Sheriff." Easy, his right hand moved. It was a blur. Rip drew and fired from the hip. He didn't aim at DM. He shot the lantern hanging by the sheriff's head. The glass exploded. The night went black. The shotgun roared, blasting a hole in the dark where Rip had been. "Move!" Rip yelled. He grabbed Harlan's arm and threw him back, toward the street. The deputy fired his pistol. The flash lit his face, pale and angry. The bullet went wide. One of the townsfolk shouted. He fired his rifle into the ground. Harlan was already moving. He fired twice. Low. He wasn't trying to kill. He was aiming for legs. A man screamed. Rip was running. He kept low. He ran for the livery. He could hear Harlan's boots right behind him. A rifle fired again. The bullets sang past Rip's ear. They reached the livery. Rip kicked the door open. They stumbled into the dark, the smell of hay and manure. "The horses," Rip said. He ran to his horse. He untied the reins. He heard Harlan doing the same. The wounded deputy appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the night. He raised his pistol. Rip fired. The shot was loud in the enclosed space. The deputy grunted. He stumbled back, disappearing. Rip swung into the saddle. He heard Harlan mount. "Go!" Rip shouted. He spurred his horse. They burst out of the livery's side door, thundering into the alley. They hit the main street at a full gallop. Rip leaned low over the horse's neck. A window opened. A rifle poked out. They were clear. They rode east, back into the badlands they had just left. They rode for a mile. They didn't slow until the lights of Rattlesnake Gulch were gone. Rip pulled his horse to a walk. It was breathing hard. He looked at Harlan. The man in black was just a shadow. "You're an outlaw now, Campbell," Harlan said. Rip looked back at the empty dock. He had just shot at a sheriff. He had shot at a deputy. The line he'd always walked, between right and wrong, was gone. It was just dust. "Yeah," Rip said. "I guess I am." They didn't run far. R.I.P. Knew a place. A narrow cut in the rock that opened into a box canyon. One way in, one way out. He'd used it once to trap a wild horse. He'd left a clear trail for Dyer's man to find. A dropped canteen? A fresh horseshoe print. He laid the bait. Now he lay flat on the canyon rim, the rock still cold from the night. The sky in the east was a pale, sick gray dawn. Harlan was 30 yards down, a black shape wedged between two boulders, his rifle resting on the rock. The silence was heavy. It was a held breath. Then Rip heard it. A single horse, walking slow. The scrape of a boot on stone. A voice, low and nervous. "I don't like this." Sheriff Dyer's voice. "He's in here." "I know it. Get ready." 3 riders appeared in the canyon mouth. Dyer in the lead. The wounded deputy, his face tight with pain. And one of the townsmen, the one who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He held his rifle like it was a snake. They rode 20 yards in. They stopped. Dyer looked up. At the high, sheer walls. He looked at the empty canyon floor. He looked back at the entrance. He knew. It's over. Amos, Rip's voice, echoed in the cut. Dyer's head snapped up. He couldn't see him. "Campbell, you're a dead man." The wounded deputy raised his pistol, aiming at the rocks. "Put it down," Rip said. "Just you, Dyer. This isn't their fight. Let the other 2 ride out." The townsman looked at Dyer. He was thinking about it. Dyer's hand was tight on his shotgun. "You're all accessories. You'll all hang." "Where is he, Sheriff?" Harlan's voice cut the air. It was flat, no echo. Dyer twisted in his saddle. "Harlan, he's not here. He's back in town. He's evidence." "You brought him," Harlan said. "He's in that wagon you left at the canyon mouth." Dyer's face went slack. "I saw the tracks," Rip called down. "One wagon, heavy. You didn't want to leave him behind." "You're not taking him?" Dyer said. "This can end." "Amos," Rip said. "Just give us Clay." Harlan stood up. He was in plain sight on the rim. "Harlan, get down," Rip hissed. Harlan didn't look at him. He looked at Dyer. "I'm done talking." He raised his rifle. Rip sighed. He sighted on the wounded deputy. Dyer saw Harlan move. He pulled his shotgun. Harlan fired. The shot boomed. A crack of thunder in the box canyon. The bullet tore through the top of Dyer's saddle horn. The sheriff's horse screamed and reared. The wounded deputy fired his pistol. The shot went wide, spanging off the rock near Harlan. The townsman panicked. He just pulled his trigger. The rifle bucked. Rip fired. His shot hit the deputy in his good shoulder. The man cried out. He dropped his pistol. He clutched his arm. Dyer was on the ground. He'd been thrown from his horse. He rolled. He came up with the shotgun. He fired both barrels at Harlan's position. Buckshot hammered the stone. Harlan was already gone, dropped back behind the rock. The townsman's horse was spinning in circles. He was trying to get it turned around. "Right out!" Rip yelled at him. "Get out!" The man didn't need to be told twice. He kicked his horse. He galloped for the entrance, low over the neck. Dyer was on his belly, trying to reload his shotgun. Harlan stood up again. He fired his rifle. The shot kicked dust by Dyer's head. Dyer scrambled. He crawled behind his fallen horse. Rip watched. This wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Harlan walked along the rim. working his way closer. He chambered another round. "Harlan, that's enough," Rip said. Harlan didn't hear him, or he didn't care. He was too far gone. The canyon echoed. The thunder had just begun. Harlan raised his rifle. He didn't aim, he just fired. Dyer fired back. His shotgun roared from behind the dead horse. A desperate, blind shot. The buckshot sprayed the rim. Harlan grunted. He stumbled back. He dropped his rifle. He looked down at his stomach, at the dark stain spreading across his duster. Dyer saw it. He stood up, shoving the dead horse aside. He was triumphant. "I got him. He's down." Harlan wasn't down. He was on one knee. He pulled his pistol. He fired. The shot was quiet after the shotgun blast. Dyer looked surprised. He looked at the small hole in his chest. He dropped his shotgun. He fell forward, his face in the dust. The canyon went quiet. Rip scrambled down the shale slide, his boots digging for purchase. He hit the canyon floor. "Harlan," he shouted. Harlan was trying to stand. He was leaning against the rock wall. A noise. From the canyon mouth, the canvas flap on the sheriff's wagon. It moved. The man climbed out. Small, hunched, Reuben Clay. He held a rifle. He looked at Dyer's body. He looked at Rip. He looked up at the rim and saw Harlan, bleeding against the rock. Clay raised the rifle. He aimed at Harlan. "Clay!" Rip yelled. Clay. He swung the rifle toward Rip. His hands were shaking. Harlan slid down the rock. He landed hard on his feet. He raised his pistol. "No!" Clay shouted, turning back to Harlan. Harlan fired. Clay dropped the rifle. He looked down. He put a hand to his chest. He looked at Harlan. He looked at Rip. He fell. Rip ran to Harlan. The man in black was sitting on the ground, his back against the canyon wall. His hand was pressed tight to his gut. Blood ran between his fingers. "It's done," Rip said. Harlan looked past him, toward Clay's body. He's dead. He's dead." Harlan closed his eyes. He leaned his head back. 5 years? He whispered. "Justice Akoff." Rip turned. Clay was on his back, trying to say something. Rip walked over. He stood looking down at the man who had started it all. He was smaller than his poster. He killed him. Clay choked. Blood frothed at his lips. Harlan's brother. He drew first. I just wanted ... Clay's eyes went wide. He tried to take a breath. "Justice," he whispered. He went still. Rip stood between the two men. One dead, one dying. The silence of the canyon was absolute. He looked at Harlan. He looked at Clay. He was the only one left standing. The silence in the box canyon was a new kind of loud. The echoes of the last shots had died, leaving only the sound of the wind, high and thin, whistling over the rim. Rip Campbell stood over the two bodies. Clay, Harlan. Then he looked at Dyer, 20 yards away, face down in the dust. 3 men. 3 kinds of justice. A black-winged shape cut the sun. A buzzard. It landed on the rim, 100 feet up. Then another. They were patient. Rip was not. He walked to Harlan's body. He looked at the rifle, still clutched in Harlan's hand. He nudged it with his boot. No, he'd need it. He walked to where Dyer's shotgun lay. He broke it open. Spent shells? He tossed it aside. He went to Harlan's grave marker rifle. He pulled it from the dirt. He found Harlan's rifle. He checked Harlan's. It was a Winchester, good iron. He jacked the lever. A live round spun out. He caught it. He looked at Harlan's rifle. He'd need a shovel. He found a flat piece of shale, sharp on one edge. He went to work. The ground was baked hard. It was caliche and rock. He didn't dig. He scraped. He chopped. The sound of the rifle but hitting the ground was a dull thud. Thud, thud. The sun climbed. The heat pressed down. Sweat ran into his eyes. It took an hour to make a shallow trough. Not a grave. A scratch in the dirt. He went to Harlan. He grabbed the man in black by the collar of his duster. He dragged him. The body was heavy. Heavier than a live man. He rolled him into the shallow ditch. Harlan's hat fell off. His eyes were open, staring at the white sky. Rip didn't close them. He unbuckled Harlan's gun belt. The leather was new, still stiff. The pistol in the holster was a Colt, pearl-handled. Clean. It felt heavy in his hand. He looked at it. He shoved it into his own belt, next to his own gun, an extra bit of trouble. He went back for Clay. Clay was small. Light Rip dragged him by his boot heels. The body left a smooth track in the dust. He rolled him into a second scratch, 10 feet from Harlan. He went back to work. He used the flat rock, his hands, the rifle butt. He piled dirt and rock on top of the bodies. It wasn't a burial, it was just covering things up. When he was done, he was breathing hard. His hands were raw. He stood over Harlan's mound. He took the man's Winchester. He jammed it, barrel first, into the dirt at the head of the grave. The stock pointed at the sky. A marker. He looked at Clay's mound. He kicked a loose rock onto it. He found another and tossed it. He left it at that. A pile of stones. He walked over to Dyer. The buzzards on the rim shifted. They watched him. He looked down at the sheriff. The man's badge was caked in dust. Rip nudged the body with his boot. He didn't take the badge. He left Dyer for the county. And for the buzzards, he caught his horse. It was grazing on a patch of dry grass. He found Harlan's black. The horse stood quiet, as if it was waiting. He took the reins. Rip led both horses out of the canyon. He did not look back. Rattlesnake Gulch was dead quiet. Noon. The sun was a hammer. The heat shimmered off the dust in the street. He rode in slow. His horse, Harlan's horse, trailing behind. A door opened. The saloon. The bartender stepped out. He was wiping his hands on an apron. He stopped. He just stood there, his hands frozen, the apron a white flag. Rip kept writing. A curtain twitched in the window of the general store. A pale face, gone. He passed the sheriff's office. The wounded deputy was sitting on the bench. His arm was in a sling. His good hand rested on his knee. He looked at Rip. He looked at Harlan's empty horse. His eyes were flat. He wasn't the law. He was just a man with one good arm, and he wasn't stupid. He didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched Rip ride by. The batwing doors of the saloon swung open. Two men. They looked out. They saw Rip. They saw the black horse. They saw the pearl-handled gun in Rip's belt. They stepped back into the shadow. The door swung shut. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Rip could feel the eyes. From the saloon, from the store, from the deputy. They were on his back. They were on the extra horse. They were on the guns. They weren't ghosts. They were just scared. He rode to the livery. He stopped. He swung down from the saddle. His legs were stiff. He pulled the big wooden door. It rumbled on its track. The sound was too loud. He led the horses inside. The smell of hay and old manure. It was dark. It was cool. He slid the big door shut. The thud of the wood closing cut off the street. It cut off the sun. It cut off the eyes. He stood in the shadows, listening to the two horses breathe. Light came through the cracks in the livery wall. Not sunlight, just gray. Rip Campbell sat up in the hay. Straw stuck to his shirt. His back ached. His hands were raw from digging. He heard a rooster. Far off. Then a door slammed. Wood on wood. The town was waking up. He stood. He looked down from the hayloft. The two horses were standing in their stalls. His mare? Harlan's black. They were quiet, waiting. He climbed down the ladder. His boots made almost no sound on the packed dirt floor. He went to his mare. He ran his hand over her neck. He began to saddle her. The smell of leather and horse sweat. He pulled the cinch tight. The horse grunted. He checked his rifle in the scabbard. He checked his own pistol. He touched the pearl-handled Colt in his belt. It was still there. Cold, he looked at Harlan's black. It was a good horse. He'd earned it. He found Harlan's saddlebags. He checked them. Nothing. Just an extra box of shells and a straight razor. He slung them over the black's saddle. He looped a lead rope onto its halter. He walked to the big livery doors. He put his hand on the wooden bar. He listened. A wagon rattled somewhere. A woman's voice, calling a name. A dog barked. He lifted the bar. He slid the door. The rumble of the wood on the track was loud in the morning quiet. A wide wedge of pale yellow light cut the darkness. He stood in the opening, letting his eyes adjust. He led the horses out. The street was empty. Almost the bartender was outside the saloon. He was sweeping the boardwalk. He wore the same white apron. He stopped sweeping. He held the broom. He stood very still. He watched Rip. Rip looked across the street. The wounded deputy was on his bench. He had a tin cup in his good hand. Steam rose from it. He looked up. He saw Rip. He saw the two horses. He saw Harlan's black. He didn't reach for his gun. He didn't stand up. He just watched Rip over the rim of the cup. A curtain twitched in the window of the general store, the one that had moved yesterday. It was still. Rip swung up into his saddle. The leather creaked. He looked at the saloon. The bartender was gone. He had stepped back inside. The batwing doors were still. He looked at the deputy. The deputy raised his tin cup. A small, stiff motion. He drank. It wasn't a toast. It was just a man drinking coffee. Rip turned his horse. He didn't look at the deputy again. He didn't look at the saloon. He rode west. He held the lead rope for Harlan's black. He rode past the last building. The tannery. The smell of curing hides hung in the cool air. He passed the town limit. The dust of Rattlesnake Gulch was behind him. The sun was just touching the tops of the mountains. It put long, thin shadows across the desert floor. Rip rode into the shadows. He didn't look back. The town was someone else's problem. The pearl-handled grip of Harlan's gun was cold against his stomach. He nudged his horse, and the mare picked up the pace. He had a long way to go.